So the tensions between Israel and Iran continue to escalate as Israel is boosting missile defenses as tensions with Iran escalate step up to the next level. An Israeli jet was destroyed by Syrian-based anti-aircraft missiles at the weekend, the first loss since 1982, after an Iranian drone breached enemy airspace, while the pilots of the jet survived by waiting until they re-entered Israeli airspace before ejecting. The attack has nonetheless sparked concern. A convoy of missile defense batteries has headed north towards the border region with Syria, while witnesses have posted photos on social media of military trucks making their way towards the town of Baqa al-Gharibia. The Israeli Defense Forces have not commented on the deployment. The current crisis escalated last weekend when an Iranian drone took off from Syria and flew through Jordan into Israel, breaching the country's airspace for around 90 seconds. The drone was then shot down by an Israeli helicopter. A security official said the squadron was sent to protect the country's skies. We identified the aircraft as an Iranian drone, and when it crossed the border, we shot it down into Israeli territory. The squadron is ready and prepared for any task it is given. In response to the incursion, Israel sent 8 jets to attack the drone's launch site in Syria, but the jets were targeted with 20 anti-aircraft missiles and 1 jet was destroyed. An IDF spokesman said Iran has been using the base in recent months for the purpose of transferring weaponry to be used against Israel. These actions by Iran at the base are ostensibly carried out under the guise of supporting the fighting under the global Islamic Jihad forces, but the actions carried out in the past 24 hours prove that its real concern is direct, violent action against Israel. So that was basically last week, and as it occurred, the Iranians supposedly sent a drone into Israel's territory. Israel shot it down with an Apache helicopter. Then they sent out 6 fighter jets to take out the base it came from. The Syrian air defense engaged and shot down one of the F-16 fighter jets, which managed to return back to Israeli territory before crashing. In response to that, Israel sent out a squadron of fighter jets and took out 12 Iranian targets based in Syria. Now we have a report in the New York Post where they appear to be encouraging Trump to engage in military action against Iran. So now is the time for Trump to re-establish a robust military deterrent toward Iran expansionism in close collaboration with regional allies. His administration declared the Revolutionary Guard a terrorist entity in October, if you remember that, and he should target key Guard bases and weapons in Syria accordingly. Such an approach could help prevent a larger-scale conflict. This comes as Israel strikes Hamas targets in Gaza, so this is the retaliation I was talking about. The Israeli military said it struck 18 targets in Gaza overnight in response to an explosive device that wounded 4 soldiers along the border with the territory, as Gaza officials said the body of 2 Palestinian teenagers who were killed trying to infiltrate Israel were recovered on Sunday. Now, I just wanted to kind of stop there for a second because the situation is like a fault line, and you get a little tremor on one side, and then it shifts to another place, and you get a little tremor here, and it shifts to another place. Eventually, the pressure is going to build up so much in one of these locations that it's going to erupt. And just like an earthquake, it may set off the entire fault line where you have a situation that happens in Israel or Syria or Iran, and that quickly escalates through the Korean Peninsula with China and North Korea and South Korea and Japan, and that quickly escalates into the European countries with Russia and NATO. So the pressure just keeps on shifting from one place to another, but eventually it's going to rupture and the entire fault line is going to give, and that is basically a metaphor for World War III. The military said its airstrikes were part of its expanded response to the attack in which 2 of the soldiers were seriously wounded. The military said the targets included weapon manufacturing sites and training infrastructures of Hamas, the Islamic militant group that rules Gaza. Israel holds it responsible for all attacks emanating from Gaza, regardless of who carries them out. There were no reports of casualties in Gaza from the attacks. Also Sunday, the Palestinian Health Ministry said it recovered the bodies of 2 17-year-olds, 17 again, and 2 of them. And obviously, if you've been watching some of these videos, you know how important the number 7, 17, 70, 777, basically 7 in all its variations. So 2 17-year-olds were shot dead near the border area in southern Gaza Strip, The Israeli military said it has shot toward 2 people who tried to cross the border fence from Gaza. The shooting happened on Saturday, and today is Sunday, so it happened yesterday. Now, the scene in the iPad Goat video where we have the mother cradling her dead son has a lot of indications into the Middle East. Obviously, the lady herself is wearing a hijab or burqa, and it looks like a Middle Eastern scene. Now, we've had quite a few reports of Palestinian children, in terms of teenagers really, being killed throughout this conflict. And it just says to me that maybe we're waiting for one news report where, rather than a teenager, a child is killed, similar to what happens in the iPad Goat video. That could be a metaphor for something else, but if it is a literal translation, then it would appear that, these kind of things are already happening, and it wouldn't be unusual for a news report to say that a child has been shot, and that may, start the whole thing, At the same time, today, Sunday, Israel and Iran are locked in bitter war words after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu branded his country's Middle Eastern neighbor the greatest threat to our world, prompting a sharp retort from Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif. In a speech to the Munich Security Conference, Mr. Netanyahu signaled that he is ready to take action against the country itself and not just its Middle East allies, if necessary, prompting Mr. Zarif to hit back hours later by claiming that the recent downing of an Israeli jet by Syrian forces had shattered Israel's so-called invincibility. Holding a piece of what he said was an Iranian drone after its incursion into Israeli airspace earlier this month, Mr. Netanyahu said Israel will not allow the regime to put a noose of terror around our neck. We will act if necessary, not just against Iran's proxies, but against Iran itself. Addressing the event for the first time, Mr. Netanyahu urged officials and diplomats from the United States and Europe to counter Iran immediately, displaying a map showing he claimed was Iran's growing presence in the Middle East. Now, if something does happen in America or to Donald Trump, that may encourage Benjamin Netanyahu to launch a preemptive strike on Iran, as he will see that he doesn't have the support of the US because something's happened there, or someone new has come into power who doesn't support Israel. So it appears that that could be the line that ends up being taken, which is important because a while ago I did a report where it said that they had basically given Benjamin Netanyahu power to launch a preemptive strike against any country, just if they feel like it. And similar to the structure of the government is similar to Congress, where they'd kind of need Congress's approval to launch a war. But with the new rules that they brought in some time ago, they don't even need all of the people there. So this decision can be made unilaterally, which is pretty serious considering we're all people. So if someone gets offended, the reaction can be extreme. Reacting in anger. It's better if you have a group of people who can make a decision together. Thereby, you get all the different aspects of the situation, and you can make a more informed decision. But if one person is capable of making that decision, then you just have to kind of trust that that person is responsible and not crazy. In other news that is not related to Israel, but related to the general situation overall, I've spoken about the La Palma Cumbre Vieja volcano that appears to be depicted in the iPad Goat video, possible eruption from there generating a tsunami. Over the last couple of days, there's been a series of earthquakes that have been that has hit the Cumbre Vieja volcano. So the Canary Island of La Palma has been hit by another flurry of earthquakes once again, prompting fears the deadly Cumbre Vieja could erupt, just 4 months after scientists recorded a swarm of more than 200 tremors. Now, the tremors mean that magma is on the move. So as the magma moves below the surface through the rocks obviously heat up and crack, and those cracks generate vibrations, and those vibrations are tremors, and they're picked up by the seismometers. and transmitted to the geologists and the volcanologists, and they interpret the data to see how likely an eruption is. Now, the volcano is an active volcano, so it's not unusual for there to be tremors there. But the Spanish archipelago was struck by 70 small earthquakes recorded between Monday and Wednesday, reaching between magnitude 1.5 and 2.6 on the Richter scale. And government officials announced more quakes were felt between 3 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. this morning, as magnitudes of between 2.1 and 1.5. Most of them were located in the area of Los Canarios, in Fiu Caliente, and in El Pueblo, Villa de Meso, although they have also been registered in El Paso and Tazacorte. The Canary government has now stepped in and called for an urgent meeting to take place on Friday to discuss why the quakes are happening again and what might happen in the future. So that's where it gets a little bit more serious and something that you should pay attention to, because it is an active volcano and these things aren't unusual. What is unusual is for the Canary government to call an urgent meeting to take place discussing what's going on there. And considering what it appears to be depicted in the iPad Goat video as the volcano erupting, possibly activated on purpose by man, in order to, generate the tsunami that has been subliminally shown in movies and TV shows, in songs and documentaries, even in the news where they're talking about this blue wave that's coming and stuff like that. Donald Trump and the wall he keeps talking about, see-through wall, could be referring to a tsunami. There's a lot of subliminal messaging about it. So the fact that this is all kind of around now, in this time frame, it just says to me it's something to watch, and I'll be watching closely. Excuse me. In other news, I put up a little comment on one of my videos regarding this, but I didn't do an actual report on it, so I just wanted to add it in. In terms of the iPad Goat video, where we have the shark on the chalkboard, looks like it's leaping up out of the ocean with its wings, with its fins kind of back, like it's got wings. We interpret the shark as an animal interpretation, as like an animal representation, of a submarine. And in that image on the chalkboard, it looks like the shark is jumping up out of the water, which would suggest it's, kind of leaping, flying. Now, the world has got its first flying submarine. This report was published on February the 15th. The flying submarine is an unmanned aircraft that is capable of traveling through the air as well as underwater, with the capability to transition seamlessly and repeatedly between the air and the ocean. The submarine is named the Eagle Ray XAV. Now, obviously, there's probably some significance in the name, which I'll look into later, and was developed with funding and assistance from Teledyne Scientific. The flying submarine has potential applications in areas such as tracking and observing wildlife. Now, I don't know if this is any relation to what potentially could happen in terms of, World War III or tsunami or an earthquake or a volcano or Donald Trump getting shot or military action taking place or an EMP or a blackout or any one of those things. But considering that we've never had a flying submarine before and it appears that iPad Goat is depicting a flying submarine, it could be that it's referring to this in terms of timescale, timeline. So when we see this, the iPad Goat 2 video could be saying to us, when we see a flying submarine, we know that we're approaching the time, or we know that we're in the right timeline. Obviously, I also referred the rocket that's on the board to the SpaceX Falcon Heavy, because it had 3 boosters and it was the largest liftoff of a rocket we've seen in a number of years. And again, that could be the iPad Goat video saying, when you see this, know that you're in the timeline that these things are approaching. And then obviously the reference to Valentine's Day, again, that could be saying this is an event all by itself, but it's also an indication of the timeline. Excuse me. So there's only one more kind of series of watch days left in February that correspond with the iPad Goat video in my interpretation, and that's February the 22nd and February the 23rd. After that, there are no more dates in February. So we'll see in the next coming days. It's the 18th today, where I had expected something to happen, but as I said in my last video, I believe that the 18th is actually connected to the 23rd, and the 17th is actually connected to the 22nd. So we'll see in a couple of days' time if anything happens. Hopefully not. Excuse me. All this comes as Russia deploys 2,000 military troops on the Japanese island. So Russia have been really pushing themselves. I keep talking about them, pushing their military out there in terms of having troops on the border of North Korea, in terms of sending their submarines through the English Channel, in terms of having a spy ship cruise along the East Coast. And now we have them encroaching in Japan. It just seems like they're completely ready to kind of get into this war, to kind of try and gain more power and take over in terms of global military dominance. It's important to keep watch on China and keep watch on Russia. China won because they probably have inside information in regards to North Korea, and Russia because they just appear to be really expanding military-wise, and encroaching on all these different countries' territories, probing airspace, flying close to American fighter jets and NATO fighter jets, coming into close contact within 5 meters of the British Navy. So they're ready. And if you just kind of look at everything, the way that Israel and Britain are prepared for a tsunami, and the way that China has moved its troops to the border and Russia has moved its troops to the border, and how they've had how Rex Tillerson and the other countries that were involved in the Korean War had their, kind of like security meeting in Canada in reference to North Korea and other situations on the peninsula. How you have Nikki Haley always talking about North Korea, but also always talking about Iran, so Iran never leaves the picture. You've got Israel bolstering its missile defenses, and everyone is in position now. All the little pieces are in position. And just like with the earthquake theory, or the earthquake metaphor, it's just like they're waiting for the rupture to begin. Or you can even compare it to a race. It's like all these countries having all their military positioned and, making all these movements. It's like when you're waiting for the 200-meter race to start and everyone's in their starting blocks, and all they're waiting for is the sound of the gun to go off. And when I say that, I just think the gun going off could be what is referenced in the iPad Goat video in terms of Donald Trump. I tell you, if something did happen there with Donald Trump, the series of escalation, the unraveling of everything would be so quick, because, as I've mentioned, Israel would lose confidence that they have an ally to back them up, and they may preemptively strike Iran. North Korea would feel emboldened. Russia would feel emboldened. China would feel emboldened. And at the same time, the left and the right in America would tear each other apart. So this guy, Donald Trump, he is important for the things to come. But while he's in power, I don't think that things will start. So, because even though he's talked the whole rhetoric, fire and fury and everything like that, nothing has actually happened. Even when he declared Jerusalem Israel's capital, there was the day of rage and there's been some deaths, but nothing on the scale that we thought has happened yet. But if Donald Trump was to be taken out of the picture, then everything would just happen. Everything. So, keep a close eye on Donald Trump. He does have the affinity with the number 7s, and the 7s have affinity with God. And I'm not saying that Donald Trump is good or bad, but the clear indication is that he's important for the plans that are to come on both sides. So he's important to God's plan and he's important to Satan's plan. But, we'll see what happens in the next coming days. Again, hopefully nothing. And along with the New York Post saying it's time for Donald Trump to attack Iran, you've got US intelligence chiefs saying the decision time is near. to attack North Korea, and that was the I think it was the CIA, not CIA director, I can't remember. It was this guy, Dan Coates here. I can't remember what he's in charge of. But he's basically saying that time is running out on North Korea. And all this reference to time, it's not just a gimmick that they're using. It's subliminal messaging. The New York Post, their point was, it's time for Trump to attack Iran's Revolutionary Guard. The US intelligence chief, decision time is near. The Golden Globes and this whole thing, time's up. Time's up on this, time's up on that. It's time to do this. The time is near. All these references to time, don't ignore them, because that's the subliminal messaging right there, telling you time's up. Decision time is near. There is no more time. And lastly, North Korea's eerie coded messages returned to the airwaves ahead of the Olympics. So this was published on February the 11th. And I've been busy analysing the iPad Goat video, so I haven't done many of these report videos in the last couple of days. It says, gentle music flowed from a stern voice reading out orders, apparently from a spy's codebook, have once again been drifting over a shortwave radio from Kim Jong-un's kingdom. Known as number stations, this activity has reappeared in the weeks before the so-called Peace Olympics takes over Pyeongchang. Recorded by an amateur radio operator all the way over in the US, the unsettling radio message seems meaningless to anyone but the intended listener. North Korea has been on a charm offensive as it closes up to the south ahead of the games, with the two enemies due to march together at the opening ceremony under the banner of the United Korea. Now that's already happened, obviously. The Olympics has already started. But while that's going on, North Korea is sending out these coded messages that can only be understood by the people who basically have the key code. It would be possible to crack into the code, but it would take a long time to understand the key code before you can actually break the cipher. So all of that is just more indication that we're right on the edge. I mean, you've got like 77 just sitting here, you know, when I see all these sevens, they're just popping up everywhere. Obviously, on the chalkboard, I pointed out the reference to 17. Now, that could be just one reference in terms of 17 people dead, which happened on Valentine's Day, which is obviously, again, pointed out in the video. Or it could be saying something else in relation to 17. And if that is the case, then I've already pointed out how 22 and 17 appear to be shown in the iPad Go video together, with 22 being represented by the letter V, and 22 being represented on the alphabet that's on the wall with the letter Z. Instead of it being a 26 letter, it's the 22nd letter on this particular alphabet. And obviously Z is the end, and if that's got a connection to 22, and V is 22 and 17 has a connection to 22, then I'm looking at the 22nd of February and the 23rd of February for these events to really boil over. That's the end of my video, you guys. I just want to bring to your attention some of the events that are going on around the world at the moment, particularly in relation to Israel and the tensions that are going on between Israel and Iran, how the codes are coming out of North Korea, and basically the reference to time's up is being displayed all over the place. So you guys use the time wisely, and make sure that you are right with God, just in case anything does happen. Well, not even just in case anything does happen, just make sure you're right with God for the sake of being right with God. But an added benefit would be, if something does happen on the 22nd and 23rd, then you don't have to worry. So with that, you guys have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and God bless.